I like to believe you carry that same kind of quiet courage, darling. What are you trying to tell me? That when a man goes off to war, we're just supposed to stay silent? No, because silence has never saved anyone. The golden age of Hollywood sparkled on the surface, but behind the scenes, it was a prison wrapped in pearls. Stars weren't just famous, they were owned. Studios controlled every smile, every headline, every so-called romance. Contracts came with strict morality clauses, and even a whisper of queerness could end a career in a heartbeat. But some women, bold, brilliant, unforgettable, dared to love in ways the world refused to understand. They hid their hearts behind closed doors, using words like roommate and gal pal to describe the loves of their lives. Some burned letters. Some married for show. Others disappeared from the spotlight just to protect the truth. But that truth never fully died. It lived on, in diaries, in coded glances, in the aching pauses of old interviews. And now, at last, we're here to reclaim those hidden histories. Not for gossip, but for legacy. Because these weren't just secret romances, they were quiet acts of rebellion. Proof that even in a world that punished honesty, love still found a way. Let's begin with a woman whose silence spoke louder than any script, and whose mystery became her legend. Greta Garbo, the woman who didn't just want to be alone, she needed to be. She didn't fade from the spotlight, she vanished into it, leaving behind only a whisper, "I want to be alone." It became Hollywood's most haunting quote, but no one ever really asked why. Beneath the mystery, behind the guarded smile and cool elegance, was a truth she never dared to speak. Garbo lived a life wrapped in silence and secrecy. She never married. Her love life was a fog of rumor and contradiction. But one name kept surfacing like a quiet heartbeat: Mercedes da Costa. A poet, a playwright, and openly lesbian. Over decades, the two exchanged hundreds of letters, burning with longing, tenderness, and emotional desperation. In one, Garbo wrote simply, "I dream of seeing you." In another, "You mean too much." Biographers believe theirs was a love that flickered on and off for years, never steady, but always intense. Garbo's fear of exposure, of being known too deeply, made lasting love impossible. But the connection? Undeniable. Other women circled her life: Lillian Tashman, Salka Vertel, friends, companions, maybe more. Yet none left the mark Mercedes did. Garbo's silence wasn't just shyness. It was survival. Her queerness, never confirmed in life, now lingers like the scent of faded perfume. Quiet, fragile. And from one silent soul to the next, we now turn to a woman who refused to hide her love, no matter the cost. Marlene Dietrich wasn't just a Hollywood icon. She was a storm in heels and a tuxedo. While Greta Garbo hid behind mystery, Dietrich strutted straight through the front door, daring the world to look away. Fearless, magnetic, and decades ahead of her time, she lived her truth in private, even as the studios tried to paint her as someone else. Off-screen, she was electric. Her love life was the stuff of legend, fierce, passionate, and unconstrained. She had well-known affairs with both men and women, including Greta Garbo, Edith Piaf, and Mercedes da Costa. Whispers surrounded her connections to Claudette Colbert and other leading ladies of the time. Long before it was acceptable, Marlene wore tailored suits, smoked cigars, danced with women in public, and dared the world to judge her. Her style wasn't just fashion, it was rebellion. Her sexuality wasn't labeled, it was lived. Hollywood tried to tame her, dressing her in gowns, scripting her as the eternal seductress. But behind the curtain, she celebrated life with the queer elite, filmmakers like Dorothy Arzner and actresses like Alla Nazimova. She never labeled herself, but she never lied either. "I love who I love," she once said, "and I never asked for permission." Her life was no fairy tale. Her affairs burned hot and sometimes ended in heartbreak. But her boldness cracked open a door for women who didn't want to live in the shadows anymore. And coming up next, a screen queen known for playing the perfect wife, whose off-screen reality was anything but, Barbara Stanwyck, America's sweetheart with a hidden truth. Barbara Stanwyck was the epitome of strength on screen, a tough, no-nonsense woman who didn't need saving. In Double Indemnity, she was cunning and seductive. In Stella Dallas, heartbreakingly resilient. But behind that steel gaze was a woman Hollywood never truly knew, because she never let them. She had one high-profile marriage, to actor Robert Taylor, but even that raised eyebrows. Many insiders whispered it was a studio-arranged union, a photo-op romance designed to smother rumors. They posed together, smiled for cameras, yet led largely separate lives. Some called it the perfect MGM illusion, but the real story was between the lines. Barbara formed deep, enduring friendships with women, like legendary costume designer Edith Head and actress Jane Withers. She took trips with women, hosted intimate all-female gatherings, and never remarried. More telling than what she said was what she didn't. A close friend once remarked, Barbara never denied anything. She just didn't think she owed anyone an explanation. She was careful. She was protecting something precious, herself. Her privacy wasn't a wall. It was armor. In an industry that demanded conformity, Barbara carved out space to simply be. Her characters mirrored her truth, layered, guarded, surviving on their own terms. She never came out. But she didn't have to. Her life was a quiet revolution. And where Barbara whispered, the next woman roared. Joan Crawford. Scandals, secrets, and forbidden love. Joan Crawford wasn't just a star, she was a storm. Fierce, dazzling, and utterly relentless, she rose from the dusty backroads of Texas to become one of MGM's most powerful and glamorous icons. Every step of her journey was calculated, every pose perfected. But behind the glittering gowns and sharp-edged stare was a woman haunted by secrets Hollywood dared not speak aloud. Publicly, Crawford's love life was a headline writer's dream. 4 husbands, countless affairs with leading men, and a reputation for irresistible charm. But the real story, the one buried beneath the studio polish, told of something far more daring, her quiet, coded romances with women. Whispers followed her, soft but persistent. Joan and Barbara Stanwyck were more than just co-stars, many believed. Rumors swirled about intimate ties with Tallulah Bankhead and pioneering director Dorothy Arzner, all members of an elite, hidden circle within Hollywood's queer underground. MGM knew everything and controlled everything. They dictated Joan's every move, who she dated, how she dressed, what she said, and most importantly, what she didn't. To be caught in a same-sex relationship then? It wouldn't just ruin her image, it would have shattered her entire career. And Crawford wasn't about to let that happen. She became a master of disguise, labeling her lovers as creative collaborators, dear friends, or travel companions. The public saw red carpets and magazine covers. Insiders saw something else, a woman torn between her hunger for success and the truth she could never publicly claim. Joan Crawford reached the top of Hollywood by playing the perfect woman. But in doing so, she buried the parts of herself that didn't fit the role. She didn't just survive the old studio system, she conquered it, all while hiding a heart that beat to a different rhythm. And now, from a woman who commanded the spotlight to someone who changed where that spotlight pointed, our next story is about a true pioneer behind the camera. Katharine Hepburn, fierce soul, hidden truths. She wasn't just a Hollywood legend. Katharine Hepburn was a force of nature. The woman who defied fashion by wearing pants long before it was acceptable, who spoke with fire, walked with purpose, and made an industry shaped by men bend to her will. 4 Academy Awards, a career that stretched over 6 decades, and a romance with Spencer Tracy that became part of Hollywood lore. But behind the fierce independence and polished legacy was a private world far more complex, and quietly queer, than the public ever knew. Hepburn once declared, "I put on pants and lived my life the way I wanted." And she meant it. While her public image was tied to Tracy, whispers told a different story. Quiet, constant, and persistent. That perhaps the true loves of her life were not men, but women. The name Laura Harding rises above the rest. Wealthy, poised, and always near. For nearly 25 years, they lived together, traveled the world, and remained inseparable. Friends called Harding Hepburn's shadow. Whether lovers or something deeper and undefined, the bond was unmistakable. There were others too, costume designers, actresses, and powerful women in Hollywood with whom she shared intense, private connections. But Hepburn, ever in control, never spoke openly. She guarded her personal life like a sacred script. In one rare moment of vulnerability, she admitted, "I never wanted to play house. I wanted to play life." It was a glimpse, perhaps the closest she ever came to revealing her truth. Katharine Hepburn didn't need the world to understand her. She only asked for respect. And in the space between what she gave and what she hid, she became not just a star, but a symbol of strength, of freedom, and of the beautiful power of a life lived unapologetically. Dorothy Arzner wasn't just Hollywood's first female director. She was a force of nature in a world that never expected her to exist. In an era ruled by men, she shattered the mold and rewrote the rules. Arzner directed more than a dozen major studio films, mentored rising stars like Katharine Hepburn and Lucille Ball, and made history as the first woman admitted into the Directors Guild of America. But her legacy stretched far beyond the camera. Dorothy lived her truth in a time when few dared. She was one of the only openly lesbian figures in classic Hollywood, sharing her life openly and unapologetically with choreographer Marion Morgan. For over 40 years, they stood side by side, on red carpets, at industry galas, in smoky lounges, unhidden, even if unspoken. Everyone in Hollywood knew, and they respected her for it. She didn't just tell stories about women, she understood them. Films like Dance, Girl, Dance, and Christopher Strong weren't just ahead of their time. They gave women roles with power, depth, and soul. Dorothy didn't direct women, one historian once said. She protected them. Stars like Joan Crawford and Claudette Colbert felt safe under her gaze, seen for who they were, never sexualized, never simplified. While others followed the rules, Dorothy wrote her own. She wore tailored suits, smoked with defiance, and spoke with the kind of clarity that made men twice her size fall silent. She never asked permission. She never needed to. And just as her films hinted at hidden truths, so did her life. As we turn the page, we meet one of her rumored muses, a woman whose double life blurred the line between performance and reality in the most intoxicating way. Claudette Colbert, Hollywood's queen of secrets. With her sparkling wit and regal charm, Claudette Colbert lit up the silver screen like few others. She won hearts, and an Oscar, for It Happened One Night, and reigned supreme as Cleopatra. But behind the flawless performances and red carpet smiles, Colbert lived a life cloaked in quiet mystery. Publicly, she was married to a Broadway producer, yet the two rarely shared a home. Whispers followed her for years that the marriage was more protection than passion, a carefully crafted facade to shield her private life from a judgmental world. Her bond with Vera Hull, a wealthy artist and socialite, went far beyond friendship in the eyes of many. The pair traveled together, hosted intimate gatherings, and even owned neighboring homes in Barbados. To those in the know, they were more than companions. They were a couple, though never publicly acknowledged. And there was Dorothy Arzner, the pioneering director who worked with Colbert on films like The Sign of the Cross. Some believed their connection ran deeper than the screen could show. She played the Hollywood game flawlessly. One old studio publicist once said, "Claudette had two faces, one for the cameras, and one for those who truly knew her." Unlike others who bucked the system, Colbert mastered it. She didn't fight the rules. She bent them, carefully, quietly, and on her own terms. Up next, the story of a woman who couldn't hide her truth, no matter how hard she tried, and nearly lost everything when the world finally found out. Elizabeth Scott, film noir's smoky siren with secrets the screen could never show. With her sultry voice, chiseled cheekbones, and a gaze that could melt steel, she embodied the danger and allure of classic noir. But off-screen, it wasn't Scott playing the femme fatale, it was the press hunting her down. In the 1950s, Confidential magazine, the most vicious tabloid of its time, launched a scandalous attack, alleging she was a lesbian and a fixture at secret queer parties. In an era where such rumors could end a career overnight, most would have folded. Not Scott. She didn't apologize. She didn't marry for appearances. She never paraded a fake boyfriend to quiet the headlines. When asked, she simply said, "I am who I am. I make no explanations." Hollywood turned cold. Studios backed away. Roles dried up. But she didn't. She kept working, kept showing up even as the limelight dimmed. She paid the price for her silence, but in that silence, she roared. Elizabeth Scott didn't just survive the Golden Age's ruthless machine. She defied it. In a time when truth was dangerous, she chose dignity over denial. And that made her legacy far more radical than any role she ever played. Mercedes da Costa, the woman who loved legends and lived like one. She was never on the silver screen, but Mercedes da Costa's fingerprints were all over Hollywood's golden age. A poet, a playwright, and a fearless rebel, she carved her name into history not with roles, but with romance. Mercedes wasn't just part of the scene, she was its spark. While the world clung to illusion, she chased raw truth, leaving behind a trail of scandal, poetry, and passion. Born into East Coast wealth and high society, Mercedes was a woman decades ahead of her time. She wore tailored suits, smoked cigars, and wrote verses so intimate they made her own family blush. But her greatest influence wasn't on the page. It was in the hearts of the women she loved. Her rumored affairs read like a who's who of timeless icons: Greta Garbo, Marlene Dietrich, Isadora Duncan, Eva Le Gallienne, even whispers of Tallulah Bankhead. She didn't just date Hollywood royalty, she transformed them. Her most haunting relationship was with Greta Garbo. Their bond unfolded through hundreds of letters, fiery, pleading, distant, and magnetic. One moment, Mercedes was begging for closeness. The next, she was the one pulling away. "I loved her," she once confessed, "but I never knew if she loved me back." When she published her memoir Here Lies the Heart in 1960, she exposed just enough to set the town ablaze. She never named names, but the world knew. Hollywood recoiled. Friends vanished. Some branded her a liar, others called her fearless. Through it all, Mercedes stood firm. She believed in truth, messy, unapologetic, and real, even if it meant losing everything. She wasn't just the woman behind the stars, she was the storm that stirred them. And in the velvet shadows of old Hollywood, where secrets whispered in champagne and desire hid behind diamond smiles, Mercedes danced loud, proud, and unforgettable. Alla Nazimova, the Empress of Sunset Boulevard. Long before Marilyn Monroe shimmered on screen, before Joan Crawford commanded the silver frame, there was Alla Nazimova, bold, mysterious, and unbreakably defiant. She wasn't just a star of early Hollywood. She was a storm. Born in Russia, Nazimova brought with her a deep, European sensuality that reshaped American cinema. In the silent film era, she wasn't just acting, she was building empires. One of the highest-paid actresses of her time, she dared to produce her own films, like the visually radical Salome, 1923, which challenged every rule Hollywood tried to enforce. But her true legacy wasn't left in celluloid. It lived in the shadows, behind the heavy doors of the Garden of Allah. That legendary Sunset Boulevard estate-turned-hotel, built by Nazimova herself, became a sanctuary for Hollywood's hidden queer elite. It was a place where same-sex love wasn't scandal, it was survival. For one night, behind those walls, truth could breathe. Nazimova, herself proudly queer, shared a lifelong romance with stage actress Eva Le Gallienne. She and her companions quietly dubbed themselves members of the Sewing Circle, a coded phrase for lesbian actresses defying the silence imposed by a ruthless, closeted industry. More than a mentor, she was a lifeline, offering roles, refuge, and respect to young closeted actresses rising through the ranks. She gave people a place to be real, one writer recalled, even if it was only behind walls. As talkies replaced silent films, Nazimova faded from the spotlight, but her fire never dimmed. Today, her spirit lives on in every queer artist who refuses to be erased. And next, we meet one of her circle sisters, a sharp-tongued comic who never hid her truth, even when Hollywood tried to shut her out. Patsy Kelly, the wisecracking rebel Hollywood couldn't bury. Patsy Kelly wasn't your typical starlet. She was loud, sharp, unapologetically funny, and never played the leading lady. Short in stature but bursting with wit, She built a career as the brassy sidekick, the comic relief who stole every scene before audiences even realized she was there. But behind the wisecracks was something even bolder. In a town ruled by secrecy and sham marriages, Patsy lived her truth out loud. In the 1930s and 40s, while most gay actors hid behind fake romances and studio-scripted lies, Patsy Kelly dared to be different. She lived openly with women, joked about her lady friends, and later confirmed what many already knew: she loved women and never pretended otherwise. "I never claimed to be something I wasn't," she said in an interview. "Why should I?" That kind of honesty was rare and risky. Hollywood admired her talent, but not her truth. By the late 1940s, the roles dried up. She wasn't glamorous like Joan Crawford or mysterious like Greta Garbo. She didn't fit the mold, and studios didn't bother to protect her. But Patsy didn't fade quietly. In the 1960s, she roared back with stage and TV roles that winked at her past. She played herself, loud, proud, and fearless. She made audiences laugh, not just because she was funny, but because she was real. Patsy Kelly may not have topped the marquee, but she owned something far more lasting than fame: authenticity. She didn't just survive Hollywood. She laughed in its face. Next, we uncover a star whose stunning beauty masked unimaginable pain. A woman who broke every rule and paid the price for it. Kay Francis, the forgotten queen who dared to live her truth. Kay Francis was once the undisputed queen of Warner Brothers, a vision of elegance, wit, and old Hollywood glamour. In the early 1930s, she lit up the silver screen with her magnetic charm and impossibly sophisticated style. She wasn't just beautiful, she was captivating, a woman whose presence lingered long after the credits rolled. But behind the satin gowns and cinematic smiles was someone quietly fighting a system that demanded silence. Her personal life was far more complex than the studio-approved headlines ever revealed. Married several times, but deeply fulfilled by none of them, Kay's heart often beat for the kind of love the world refused to see. Whispers of her relationships with women, like actress Marjorie Main and high society figures far from the spotlight, were carefully erased by the studio's PR machines. Her greatest romance, however, may have been with something rarer than love: her independence. But Hollywood had no script for a woman who refused to play by the rules. As she aged and rejected the tidy role of a submissive wife or background figure, the industry turned cold. By the 1940s, Warner Brothers cut her loose. Offers dried up. The cameras stopped rolling. She was too intelligent to be manipulated, and too sincere to fake a version of herself that made others comfortable. Too honest for the game, one biographer said. And the price of that honesty was exile. Kay Francis died mostly forgotten by the very town she once ruled, but her silence was never weakness. It was protection. It was protest. And she wasn't alone. This story doesn't end with one woman, it ends with a reckoning. With the truth that so many women like her carried alone for decades. In secret, in silence, in whispers and coded glances, they loved bravely in a world that would have erased them for it. Actresses who played perfect roles by day and hid their true selves by night. Lovers whose names were buried in journals. Careers derailed by quiet defiance. Greta Garbo taught us that silence holds its own kind of strength. Marlene Dietrich made androgyny iconic. Dorothy Arzner changed the game behind the camera. Mercedes de Acosta bled truth into her words even as it cost her everything. And women like Patsy Kelly and Kay Francis refused to be anyone's lie. Hollywood didn't thank them. It erased them. It punished them. But they persisted, and because of that, they changed everything. They didn't just survive the golden age. They chipped away at its walls, one hidden truth at a time. And today, in a world still grappling with LGBTQ+ acceptance, their lives are more than history. They're a roadmap. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Which of these brave women left the deepest mark on you? These women weren't just icons. They were revolutionaries in pearls. Thanks for watching, and for helping to keep their legacy alive.